welcome to Simpler Bible, a daily journey to biblical understanding. For episode 95 today, we are in 1 Kings 3 and 4, and then we're going to jump over to Psalm 89 and read a psalm by a guy named Ezra. Ethan the Ezraite. So that's who it's by. Anyway, today is where we left off yesterday. It's Solomon's prayer for wisdom, but it gives us a little bit more detail. So we're going to go back into this. This is now 1 Kings 3 and 4. Solomon made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. By the way, that's going to be a problem for him. So Solomon married the queen of Egypt, and Solomon's going to end up marrying a lot of other queens, these daughters of all these other nations. And this is what's ultimately going to be Solomon's downfall, but we'll get to that in a couple of days. He took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had finished building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. So that gives us a little bit more of a timeline. The people were sacrificing at the high places, however, because no house had yet been built for the name of the Lord. So the people are sacrificing at the high places. Notice that, okay? Places, not just one. Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and made offerings at the high places. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was great. That was the great high place. Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. What is the problem with the people offering sacrifices in the high places? Well, keep in mind, at Gibeon was the place where the tent of meeting was and the altar of the Lord was that Moses had built. But the main problem is that people are making sacrifices at the high places instead of the priest. Like, these people are just kind of worshiping however they want to. And then Solomon is making his own sacrifices at the high places, which is counter to the law. It's contrary to the law. And so the king went to sacrifice in Gibeon, for that was the great high place. Gibeon is, again, the Gibeonites. You remember those guys are the ones that deceived Joshua. We see them in 2 Samuel 2. We see them in Joshua 9 and 10. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night and said, "Ask what I shall give you." Solomon said, "You have shown great and steadfast love to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in faithfulness, righteousness, and uprightness of heart. You have kept for him his great steadfast love and have given him a son to sit on his throne. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. Although I am but a little child, I do not know how to go out or to come in, and your servant is in the midst of your people, whom you have chosen, a great people, too many to be numbered or counted for multitude. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, that I might discern between what is good and evil, for who is able to govern this great people of yours?" It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this, and God said, "Because you've asked this, and not asked for yourself long life or riches or the life of your enemies, but asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, behold, now I will do according to your word. I will give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you who has ever been before, and none like you shall arise after. I give you also what you have not asked, riches and honor, so that no other king will compare to you all your days. And if you walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and my commandments, as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days." And Solomon awoke, and behold, it had been a dream. And he came back to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Again, his father David did this too. It's just not right, according to the Jewish law. And he offered up burnt offerings and peace offerings and made feast for all of his servants. So all of this is questionable. All of this is flirting with danger. It's idolatrous. So Solomon's wisdom, probably the most famous story about Solomon in the Bible, right here, beginning in verse 16. Two prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. The one woman said, "Oh, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth to a child while she was in the house. On the third day after I gave birth, this woman also gave birth, and we were alone. There was no one else in the house with us, only we two were in the house. And this woman's son died in the night because she lay on him. So she arose at midnight, took my son from beside me while your servant slept, laid him at her breast, and put her dead son at my breast. When I arose in the morning to nurse my child, behold, he was dead. But when I looked closely at him in the morning light, behold, he was not the child that I had born." But the other woman said, "No, the living child is mine, and the dead child is yours." The first woman said, "No, the dead child is yours, and the living child is mine." And thus they spoke before the king. So the situation is two prostitutes who live in a house of prostitution, which, again, problems, right? This is showing how far Israel and Jerusalem have strayed from the Lord. Probably temple prostitutes, who knows? We're not sure, but these ladies, these prostitutes, women of ill repute, one has a son. 3 days later, the second lady has a son, and they are sleeping at night, and second lady rolls over on her son and smothers him in his sleep, kills him, realizes that she's done that, trades babies, and now they're standing before Solomon, And the mother of the living son is going, hey, like she has my baby. And the mother of the dead son goes, no, the living one's mine, the dead one's hers. And there's disagreement. So then Solomon says in verse 23, the king said, this one says, this is my son that's alive and your son is dead. The other one says, no, your son is dead and my son is the living one. And the king said, bring me a sword. So a sword was brought to the king, and he said, cut the living child in two, give half to one and half to the other. And the woman whose son was alive said to the king, because her heart yearned for her son, oh, my lord, give her the living child. By no means put him to death. But the other one said, he shall be neither mine nor yours. Divide him. And the king answered and said, give the living child to the first woman, and by no means put him to death. She is the mother. And all Israel heard of the judgment that the king had rendered, and they stood in awe of the king because they perceived of the wisdom of God that was in him to do justice. Now, I can almost guarantee this. If you are watching Netflix, Hulu, whatever, sometime over the course of this next 12 months, you are going to see an example of this in some sitcom, some movie, some TV show. I see it probably twice a year, and I'm not even watching a ton of shows. I remember it vividly from Seinfeld when Newman has to be the wise one to decide if Elaine or Kramer get to keep the bicycle. And but like this thing is mentioned everywhere. I've been wanting to do this for years. Maybe next year's the year. Simpler Bible this year is taking a little bit more of my time. But what I've wanted to do for years is have a notebook and mark down every secular reference to the Bible, everything that references Noah's flood, everything that references Solomon's wisdom. This story right here shows Solomon's wisdom. But what's crazy to me is that the secular world draws upon this and uses it in so many of their examples. So look. Let me know, message Simpler Bible, let us know when and where you see this example of Solomon's wisdom being used in whatever show or movie you watch. I promise you will see it. So chapter 4 of 1 Kings says this, King Solomon was king over Israel, and these were his high officials. Azariah, the son of Zadok, was priest. Elihoreph and Ahijah, the sons of Shisha, were secretaries. Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, was recorder. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was in command of the army. Zadok and Abiathar were priests. Azariah, the son of Nathan, remember Nathan was the one who rebuked David, was over the officers. Zabud, the son of Nathan, was priest and king's friend, which is kind of cool. He's the king's friend. Ahishar was in charge of the palace. Adoniram was the son of Abda and was in charge of the forced labor. Solomon had 12 officers over all of Israel who provided food for the king and for his household. Each man had to make provisions for 1 month in the year. And then it's going to tell us who those 12 commanders were. Jump down to verse 20. It says, Judah and Israel were as many as the sands by the seashore, and they ate and drank and were happy. This language occurs a couple of times. It's prophetic usually. Every time it's prophetic. It's used in Isaiah 10:22. It's used in Hosea 1:10, speaking of the people of Israel and speaking typically of judgment that has come against them. Romans 9:27 uses the same language, that though Israel be as many as the sand on the seashore, only a remnant of them will be saved. And so this language is kind of used to show the blessing that Israel has received, how large they've become, but then also, even though they've become large, they are turning away from the Lord. Solomon ruled over the kingdoms from the Euphrates to the land of the Philistines and to the border of Egypt, and they brought tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. Solomon's provision for one day was 30 cores of fine flour, 60 cores of meal. This is a lot. This is a lot of food for one day, but it's for his whole household. 10 fat oxen, 20 fed cattle, 100 sheep, besides deer, gazelles, roebucks, and the fattened fowl. So for one day, 10 oxen, 20 cows, 100 sheep, deer, gazelles, roebucks, and all sorts of fattened birds. For he had dominion over all the region west of the Euphrates, from Tifsha to Gaza, over all the kings west of the Euphrates, and he had peace on all sides around him. And Judah and Israel lived in safely from Dan even to Beersheba, every man under his... when they say Dan to Beersheba, the reason they'll do that is because that's kind of like these 2 points on the map. So from this part to this part on the map, everyone lived in safety. every man under his vine and every man under his fig tree all the days of Solomon. Solomon also had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen, and those officers supplied provisions for King Solomon for all who came to King Solomon's table, each one in his month. They let nothing be lacking. Barley and straw for the horses, and swift steeds they brought to the place where it was required each day according to his duty. And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure and breadth of mind like the sand of the seashore. There's that again. So that Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the people of the East, all the wisdom of Egypt. He was even wiser than all the other men, wiser than Ethran the Ezrahite. And Heman is going to be part of the guys who lead in the worship of the temple, and Calcol and Darda, the sons of Mahol, and his fame was in the surrounding nations. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. We clearly do not have all the writing of Solomon. He spoke of trees from the cedar that is in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the wall. He spoke also of beasts and of birds and of reptiles and fish. And all the people of the nations came to hear the wisdom of Solomon from all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. He is wiser than everybody else who has ever lived at this point. But it mentions by name Ethan the Ezrahite, and Ethan wrote Psalm 89. I thought growing up that David wrote all the Psalms. That's not true. David wrote at least half the Psalms, maybe a little bit more than that. But the sons of Asaph wrote some. Korah and his relatives wrote some. Moses wrote a couple. Solomon wrote one or two. Ethan wrote one. And then there are some that are unattributed to people. So let's read Ethan's Psalm, of whom Solomon is wiser than Ethan. But Psalm 89, Ethan says this: I will sing of the steadfast love of the Lord forever. With my mouth I will make known your faithfulness to all generations. For I said, steadfast love will be built up in the heavens. You will establish your faithfulness. You have said, I have made a covenant with my chosen one. I have sworn to David my servant. I will establish your offspring forever and build up your throne to all generations. So that's the covenant promise that God made to Abraham back in 2 Samuel. And Ethan says, let the heavens praise your wonders, O Lord, your faithfulness in the assembly of your holy ones. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings, this is interesting, who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord, a God greatly to be feared in the council of the holy ones, and awesome above all who are around him. So we have these three phrases: the holy, the heavenly beings, the holy ones, and those who are around God. And the Bible talks a little bit about that. We saw that in Job chapter 1, that God is in heaven and all of the hosts of heaven are gathered around him, and including the devil. We'll see that in 1 Kings 22, that God is standing before the presence of all the holy ones. It's mentioned in Psalm 82 that God is Lord over all the lords, that all those ones that are in the heavenly realms. And then in Deuteronomy 33:2, Moses recounting the coming of the Lord on Mount Sinai says he was surrounded by 10,000 of his holy ones. So there's this idea here that there's an understanding at least of the holy ones, the supernatural beings, the heavenly beings that gather around the throne of God. And so the Lord of God of hosts, who is mighty as you are, O Lord, with your faithfulness all around you. He says, who is mighty as you are? You rule the raging sea. When its waves rise, you still them. You crushed Rahab like a carcass. You scattered your enemies from your mighty arm. Rahab is used in several places kind of as a generic term of some enemies of God, sometimes attached to Egypt, but not always. The heavens are yours. The earth is also yours. The world and all that is in it, you have founded them. The north, the south, you've created them. Tabor and Hermon joyously praise your name. You have a mighty arm, strong as your hand, high as your right hand. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. I love this. Steadfast love and faithfulness go before your face. Blessed are the people who know the festal shout, who walk, O Lord, in the light of your face, who exalt in your name all the day, and in your righteousness they are exalted. For you are the glory of their strength. By your favor our horn is exalted. Our shield belongs to the Lord, our King, to the Holy One of Israel. Of old you spoke in a vision to your godly one and said, I have granted help to the one who is mighty. I have exalted one chosen from the people. I have found David my servant. With my oil I have anointed him, so that my hand shall be established with him. My arm also shall be strengthened with him. The enemy will not outwit him. The wicked shall not humble him. I will crush his foes before him and strike down those who hate him. My faithfulness and my steadfast love shall be with him, and in my name shall his horn be exalted. So this gives us a clue that this was probably written still during the lifetime of David. He says, I will set his hand on the seas and his right hand on the rivers. He will cry to me, you are my Father, my God, and the rock of my salvation. And I will make him the firstborn. That's a reference there specifically to David. The highest of the kings of the earth. My steadfast love I will keep with him forever, and my covenant will stand firm for him. I will establish his offspring forever, and his throne as the days of heaven. But this is where it's interesting also, because it's not just a reference to David, but it's also a reference to Christ. In John chapter 12, some of the people gathered around Jesus said, we've heard from the scripture that the Messiah is going to remain forever. And this is one of those references to the coming Messiah of the line of David who will remain forever. If his children forsake my law and do not walk according to my rules, if they violate my statutes and do not keep my commandments, then I will punish their transgressions with the rod and their iniquity with stripes. But I will not remove from him my steadfast love or be false to my faithfulness. I will not violate my covenant or alter the word that went forth from my lips. For once I have sworn by my holiness, and I will not lie to David. His offspring shall endure forever, his throne as long as the sun before me. Again, a picture of Christ. He says this down here in verse 48. And I love this. He says, what man can live and never see death? Who can deliver his soul from the power of Sheol? He's like talking about, look, we're all going to die. He says, Lord, where's your steadfast love of old, by which your faithfulness, which you swore to David? Remember, O Lord, how your servants are mocked, how I bear in my heart the insults of many nations, with which your enemies mock you, O Lord, with which they mock the footsteps of your anointed. But blessed be the Lord forever and ever. Amen. So let's go back to this question. What man can live and never see death? None. Every man will die. Hebrews says it is appointed once for man to die, and then after that comes the judgment. Who can deliver his soul from the power of the grave? None, which is why we need Jesus. But that's a conversation for another time, and that gets us through this beginning of the reign of Solomon, and also this poem, this psalm of Ethan, the Ezrahite. And tomorrow you can join me in 1 Kings 5 and 6. We'll see you then. Thank you so much for journeying with us today at Simpler Bible. Together, you and I have looked at another passage of Scripture and come to know the Bible a little bit better and enjoy God more fully. This video, along with all of our videos, can be found at simplerbible.com, where you can enjoy our Through the Bible in a Year course. You can also enjoy a wealth of resources, blog posts that take you a little bit deeper into the text, a Bible study format that you can use with your small groups or your family, and we're creating new content all the time, all with the commitment to help us be people who know and enjoy God more fully. Thank you so much for being part of it, and we can't wait to see you next time.